This time in the Prop Master, well, basically I just try to make up for the fact that in the last video, I just barely managed to make it through a single step of the process. You know, sometimes I might just talk too much. So this time we're just going to keep it as simple as possible and just pick up right where we left off in the last video. Which, if you'll remember, we had just finished up adding the urethane to the knee pads and we were going to PlastiDip everything else. But first we're going to need to heat seal everything and of course add Boba Fett's famous damage. Now don't forget, if you're doing this project using Sintra, you can work it exactly the same way as I'm working with the EVA foam. All you have to do is pretend I'm using the Sintra and follow right along. Of course, you'll have to use a saw to cut it out, and there's no reason to heat seal it or PlastiDip any of it. There's also a little different way that you can go about adding damage to it, but unfortunately you're going to have to wait to the next video to see that. Oh, and of course, make sure you wear those gloves and a respirator when you get to heating and shaping the Sintra. So of course that's quite a bit of work to do, so let's get started. And the first thing we're going to want to do is to make sure we heat seal the foam. I know I haven't done a very good job of showing you heat sealing, but hopefully this will help. Let me try one other piece. So I just have here is a piece of foam, EVA foam, and it hasn't had anything done to it yet, so hopefully you'll be able to see when I heat seal this. So just turn on your heat gun and let it heat up, and then when you go over it, there we go, you can definitely see that. It's almost like we're spraying a shadow on there. And that's all it takes. You don't have to heat this up like you would if you were trying to reshape it. And especially if you've done some sanding on it, it's a really good process because it kind of just seals up the outside layer of the foam and it melts away some of the little fuzz balls that accumulate when you do some sanding on this foam. Because you'll never be able to get it smooth with finer and finer sandpaper. But when you heat seal it like that, it'll take care of that. And now basically I'm just going to go over all of these pieces that same way and just make sure that everything's been heat sealed. Like I said before, you don't want to heat this up enough to change the shape of it. You just want to lightly go over it. And now we can go ahead and get ready to hit it with the PlastiDip. Okay, actually I jumped the gun a little bit when I said let's go ahead and get these ready for paint. There is one thing we need to do before we paint these, and that is or I should say, there's something we need to do before we get them ready for paint, and that is to go ahead and put the damage on the armor itself. This is Boba Fett's armor, so of course it's got quite a bit of damage scattered throughout. And you can achieve that in various ways. You can use an X-Acto knife or your usual utility knife. I'll go ahead and go through some of the techniques and the various positions on the armor. So for this collar piece, the front collarbone or collar piece armor, you've got point right about here. It's about halfway between the very center and the sort of this edge right along here on the right side, or left side if you're wearing it, right side if you're looking at it. It's about the size of a dime. That, as it turns out, is about If you don't live in the States, that is about 3/4 of an inch. I've gone ahead and just literally taken a dime, set it there, and traced around it. And if you want to use a knife, you just sort of start on your outside edge, and you just want to sort of carve a shallow little divot. Helps if your blade is remotely sharp. Okay, I've traded razor knives here. And so you can just kind of carve in around the edges. It does not have to be a perfect circle. In fact, it probably should not be a perfect circle. But you do want it to be very shallow. You don't want to cut through this stuff. Remember, it's only 1/4 of an inch thick. Okay, so that looks pretty good. You also have a similar sized piece here. It is on this, I'd say probably about, if you're just going to go from this edge to where it begins to turn toward the front, I'd say it's probably 2/3 of the way down. You know, if you go to that corner, then it's just up a little bit. Same size, but it's only halfway visible. And in this case, you also want to remove a little bit of the material along the entire edge. So you want to kind of carve in to the side just a little bit. Just be careful, these blades are very sharp. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, now another method is what I would call the Tweezer Method. And basically I've got a pair of needle nose pliers, and we're on the cod piece now. And this is about the size of a quarter, which is about an inch, just a little less than an inch. And its position is just above the point where, when you put this piece on, the point where you have a straight edge and then it curves, you want to go pretty much right in that area would be the bottom part of your circle. Maybe an 1/8 of an inch above that, somewhere in that general area. And then about 1/4 of an inch from the center would be the leftmost part. And once again, I just put 1/4 there and traced around it. And I'm just going to reach in with my pliers. And it kind of helps if you twist, grab it, twist and pull. Just don't get too carried away, because once again, you know, you can tear a hole through this whole thing if you're not careful. And ideally, you want it to be the deepest in the middle and then get shallower as you go out toward the edges. You just want to use your circle as a basic guide. It definitely should not look like a perfect circle when you're done. You want it to be not smooth, but you don't want little chunks sticking up everywhere. So I'm trying to pull off some of those little stalagmite kind of things that are sticking up. Okay, so there we have that. Now, what I think is the easiest way is, once again, to go back to the Dremel. And you also have back to that dime size, half, you know, like a half of a dime up on the edge. Once again, you don't want it to end up as a perfect circle, and you don't want it to be real smooth, so you want to kind of go in there and, you know, gouge in little bits and just kind of make it an irregular shape. And you want to make it, you know, a little bit irregular here as well, since it's, you know, going to be hitting right here on the edge. It's going to have some depth on the end as well. Now there's also one very small little piece. It's about an inch off of where this little line is here. And it's about 1/4 of an inch down from the top. It's very small. It's maybe like 1/4 of an inch across. You don't want to go very deep, you just want to rough it up a little bit. And that's it for the codpiece. You probably want to smooth this out a little bit. You can use sandpaper, or I'm going to use the Dremel tool. Or you can just keep on, you know, taking out the little pieces. I'm just trying to speed things up a little bit. Okay, and that's it for the codpiece. For the chest armor, the right side chest armor is pretty much unscathed as far as actual pieces of material being removed. The left side, however, has a few little areas here and there. If you come over right where this little divot is here, level with that, maybe a little less than 1/4 of an inch out, just somewhere pretty close, and a little bit lower than that. So where this is will not be the middle of the dent, probably about 1/4 of the way. So, you know, come down another just a little bit so that there's 1/4 of this above where this divot is, and just a little bit over. In this case, it's the size of a nickel, which is about 7/8 of an inch. Kind of helps to pull it in to make little lines kind of in toward the center. I just want to make sure that it's a little deeper in the middle than it is on the edges. We're getting a little too much like little lines, so I'm going to smooth that out a little bit. And there's that one. Now also we have a fairly sizable kind of a gash right along here. It's about 1 inch down from the top on this far left edge, and it comes out about 1 inch. And I think what I'm going to do with that one is I'm going to start out with the knife, and I'm just going to kind of carve the beginnings of the little slash or gouge. Don't know if this was supposed to be a lightsaber or just a very oblique blaster hit or something. And once I have that to where it really looks like something sharp has cut into it, I'm afraid if I just used the Dremel tool, it would just be really rounded. But now that I have that cut, I can go ahead and expand it out a little bit. But it should kind of come and then kind of curve up toward the edge. And then right below it, there's just a little round ding, and I'm gonna, and then a smaller one underneath that one. Okay, let's see that. Can make that not look quite so round. Okay. So there's that. think that's it for the left chest. The abs have a few dings here. Right about the middle between, you know, take the middle and this edge over here, we're sort of about in the middle. There's some scratching going here, and then you've got kind of an oblong, it's not so much like a bullet hole kind of a hit, it's just kind of an oblong little dent. So I'm actually going to make this one a little bit smoother so it doesn't look like it's blown stuff out. It's going to look more like the metal's just been pushed in. It's about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, somewhere in that general area. Roughly about the size of this this little bit. I want it to be smooth, but I don't want the edges to be straight, so it still needs to be irregular. There's also a dime size, 1/2 of a dime size marked down here, pretty much directly below this one. Just come straight down and you do 1/2 to 2/3 of a dime size coming up here. Okay, the other mark on here is a little different. Okay, so for this part, you're going to start out with a 1/4 size circle that is about, if you come to this little corner here and you come out diagonally from that 45 degrees about 3/4 of an inch and start, you know, that'll be this edge right here of your circle. That's, you know, just somewhere in that general location. And so go ahead and draw your circle there that's about 1 inch in diameter, marking there, because what you're really doing is going to use that for your spacing, and evenly spaced with one in the middle at the top, one, it's like if that's 12 o'clock, this would be 8 o'clock, and this would be 4 o'clock. You're just going to put about a little smaller than a 1/4 inch little depression there. And in order to put those 3 little circles in there, which are all a little less than maybe a 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to use this. This is just, when you get your rotary tool, it's going to come with some form of this. What this is, it's got a little screw in the end here, and this will be to attach a cutting wheel of some kind of a, you know, a little cutting disc. And I'm just basically have no disc on there. Make sure this is nice and tight. And I'm just going to come straight in, maybe 1/8 of an inch deep. Remember, this is only roughly a 1/4 of an inch deep, so maybe about half that depth. I'm just going to go one there, and one there. And that'll give us our 3 circles. And hopefully you'll be able to see. there you have it. And I have no idea what that's supposed to be for on his armor, but it's there, so I put it on mine. And that's it for the ab piece. And go ahead and switch my bit back. Okay, now you want to take one of your shoulder armor pieces, and you've got a quarter size one. It's basically, you know, if you've got your lines drawn here, it's almost right up against this line and right up against the top. Essentially it's kind of nestled in that corner. Doesn't have to be exact, but pretty close. A quarter size. I just want to do it the same way I did the others. Okay, so there's that piece. Smooth up a little rough spots there. And then the other one you have is, if you come down to this, you know, right side, if you're looking at it, come down to this corner and then come down maybe a third of the way toward this corner, and then about roughly a quarter of an inch from the edge, you're going to have a dime size. Same kind of divot. If you're having a hard time coming from the outside edge in with the rotation of it's really making you have a bad hook on it, just switch over and start going from the center out. And usually it's a little, you know, if you're having a hard time this direction, then just go that direction and it'll be easier to control. That's it for, you only have to do one of the shoulder pieces, which is a good thing because I have somehow managed to lose the other one of these. I have to go see if I can find it. But luckily there's no divots on the other piece. Got some little jagged pieces sticking up, so I want to get rid of those. And that leaves us with the last pieces with damage, which are the knee pads. And I would not have done this before I put on the urethane, just because we put so much urethane on, it definitely would have filled in. There might have been some depression there, but I think it's better just to do it after you put on the urethane. And this is the right side knee pad. And if you're looking at it, you want to go over to this right side. It's about halfway from this point to the very centermost tip here, about halfway, and then about 3/4 of an inch from the edge. I'm going to go ahead and put that in. It's a nickel sized. Okay, you don't want to go in very deep. In fact, I didn't even go through all the urethane, but I've got my mark. And then if this is the center, you want to go up to this, sort of this edge here, to the center, and let's take it back. Go up this inside edge, kind of follow that line up, and then the center mark, and right in the middle, you just want to put a little divot right in here. Nothing too severe, just a little bit of a ding there. Okay, so that's it for one. On the left side knee armor, if you're looking at it, go to the far left side, and it's kind of like if you go straight up this edge, and then almost right up against that edge, there's a dime-sized piece, kind of nestled between this line here, maybe just a little bit to the right of that, but it can be right up against that line if you want to, or just a little bit to the right. And then touching the top, a dime-sized little divot right there. The urethane can definitely be difficult to sand, so this also might be a good time to go ahead and use your knife. Don't worry about going through the urethane. In this position, you're not going to be really needing that much urethane there. So if you do end up, kneeling down, this isn't going to come in contact with anything. Just be careful, because the urethane is tough enough that it's going to pull away from the foam as opposed to breaking itself. So if you're not careful, you can just rip a section off, because it'll just rip away the top layer of foam or peel away from the foam as opposed to breaking. Now I'm going to use the Dremel just to smooth out those edges a little bit so they don't catch on anything. Okay, so now on this piece right here, where we've gone that deep, well, let's go ahead and do this one first. So if you draw a line, or if you did draw a line down the middle of this, down here at the tip, you want to put almost like a third to a half of a crescent moon shape. Again, be careful with these knives, they're very sharp. And there's no need to get down below the urethane if you don't. If you do get down below the urethane, that's okay too. You just want there to be enough of an edge that it's noticeable. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go back over, there's a little bit of the foam showing here, and of course quite a bit there. And I'm just going to take some super glue, and I'm going to pour it in there, and then wipe it out. Good, pour it in there, wait maybe 10 seconds and then wipe it out with a paper towel. Do the same thing here. It'll just give a nice little protective coat on those areas. And we're ready to go ahead and seal it all and get ready for paint. One thing, the areas where you just, violated the surface, you want to go ahead and hit those with the heat gun and seal them up. Any place that gets sanded or, cut into, give it a shot with the heat gun so it all seals up and smooths out any little fuzzy areas that are there. Okay, and then we're on to the next step. Okay, so I'm just out in the backyard. I've got a drop cloth dropped down on the back porch, and we're ready to go ahead and seal this up with some PlastiDip spray. I've got mine over here. It's been warming up in some hot from the tap water, not boiling water by any means. You don't want to try to blow anything up. It's been in there for 10 minutes. And you're going to want to shake this up for a full minute before you use it. Now, I've actually already done that. And you want to go ahead and do the back first. That way you don't damage the front when you flip it over to paint the back. So we're going to go ahead and do at least 3 coats on the back side, and then we'll flip it over and do the front. Now, we're going to get some on the front. There's just no way around that, especially when you've got curves like this sticking up. Oh, and you might notice that I've actually found the missing shoulder pad. I actually found it out here. So I think we've got everything ready. Let's go ahead and spray. You want to get the can about 10 inches away. And when I spray, I'm going to start spraying before I actually get to the piece that I'm spraying. I'm going to go across, and then I'll go actually off of it and then stop. You don't want to hold this down and just go back and forth, because every place that you stop to change directions is going to get twice as much paint, or in this case PlastiDip spray. In that spot, you're going to get big globs in those areas. So you want to try to stay the same distance away from it. And I'm just going to go like that, and you'll see. By the way, make sure you do this outdoors or in a spray booth. At the very least, have a respirator, because this is pretty nasty stuff as far as trying to breathe it in. This is also not like regular spray paint where you want to get just a light dusting in the first coat. You want to put a pretty good coat down. That's the hardest piece right there. Unfortunately, you can't turn this upside down like you can some of the other spray paints. It's also a good idea to do this pretty soon after you've shaped everything. So try to get this all done fairly quickly, just because this will help hold everything in place. Oh, the wind's picking up. I think a storm may be coming in. I'm trying to get this done before I get several days of rain, which seems to be always the case with me. This is not helpful. Luckily, the backside is not as important. Okay, this is starting to get ridiculous. This is by no means ideal here. Okay, this is getting ridiculous. I think I may have to move this into the garage and wear a respirator, because I don't think this is going to work out here. But that's one coat. I'll need to wait a full hour, at least 30 minutes, but I think it says to wait a full hour if you can. Yeah, I need to wait at least 30 minutes between each coat. And I'm going to go ahead and do 3 coats. A second coat just like this one, and then a third coat that I'm going to put on so thick that it'll just look wet, but not so thick that you get runs or sags in it. So in 30 minutes we'll put on another coat, probably in my garage. Okay, so it's been a little over 30 minutes and I've moved everything into the garage. I don't know if you can hear it, but I've got my fan going for some ventilation. I'm also going to wear a ventilator. Probably a good time to talk about ventilator real quick. This is a dust mask. This one is actually rated for paint, but that's going to be rated for a paint with low or no volatile organic compounds. So this is a low or no VOC paint rated dust mask. Unfortunately, the stuff we're using is pretty much all volatile organic compounds. It is basically an aerosolized rubber. So unless you have something that looks like this, which this is a respirator, unless you have something that looks similar to this, you do not need to do this someplace where there's not really good ventilation. So I highly suggest doing it, oops, that's gonna be terrible. So I highly suggest doing it outside somewhere, preferably when there's not a high wind blowing and blowing grass and dirt and everything all over your work. But someplace with good ventilation. Okay, so once again, I have my PlastiDip spray, which I have left in some hot from the tap water soaking for 10 minutes, and I've shaken it for a full minute. And now I can go ahead and put on another coat, a reasonably thick coat. Here we go. Okay, so now that I'm a little bit outside of that area, turn the fan down to low. A couple things there. First of all, I know I said I think 11 inches before. I find it actually works a little better, somewhere between 6 and 8 inches. You're just going to have to pay attention to see what it's doing. If you get too close, it'll start to puddle up and sag, kind of sag. You'll get too thick of a coat for it to support its own weight. That's too close. And you get a little too far away, it just doesn't cover as well. So it's actually a little better to be between 6 and 8 inches. And the last thing is, I don't know if you saw me or not, but when you get finished with the coat, turn the can upside down and spray it until no paint comes out anymore. And that'll clear it because it will definitely clog up these nozzles. So 30 minutes and we'll put on the last coat for the back. Okay, time for a third coat. Just me trying to finish up that can. It's pretty much done. So 3 coats for all those pieces. It's going to be pretty much 1 can. And it's pretty late right now, so I'll probably just wait for morning to go ahead and do the other side. So we'll wait till then. Okay, it's the next morning, and we're ready to go ahead and start painting the front side. I've used up the last of that black PlastiDip spray, and what I have left is white, so it'll be a completely different color, but don't worry, it's the same stuff. You don't have to do different colors or anything like that. It's just what I happen to have at the moment. If you'll notice, I have the back set up on some bricks. I've got 1 here and then 2 there, just to hold it stable. I'm going to need to paint the the backside here, on here, so I can't lay that on the ground. So I'll go ahead and paint that part, and then set it back down on the bricks, and we'll be done with that. Just like before, I have shaken the PlastiDip spray for a minute, and before that it had soaked for 10 minutes in some hot water, and so let's go ahead and get on with it. I've noticed that
the nozzle seems to be having a hard time when I turn it off and on, so I've started kind of going, starting spraying here and going all the way across, and then I'm just going back and forth without turning on and off the valve, without spraying. But I'm going past it each time, so my stop and start marks are off of the actual piece. Got a drip there. See if I can get it run. Let's see if I can get it to run the other direction. I just realized that if you look on this piece right here, I just realized that this still just has this little square on with marker. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my X-Acto and I'm going to cut, not all the way through, just part of the way through the foam along that line, and then I'm going to hit it with the heat gun, and then it'll open up and make a little outline there. Okay, I don't know if you can see, but I've just, just kind of scored maybe a 1/16 of an inch down, nowhere near all the way through it. But I'm just going to scored that with a razor blade or a razor knife or whatever you got, and now I'm going to hit it with the heat gun. You'll be able to see the difference. Okay, and here it is. Now that I've hit it with the heat gun, I don't know how we can see that, if at all. It'll be too close. But you can see that it's now opened up, and it's just got a little bit of a, a line there that's opened up. And now I can go ahead and finish spraying it. Okay, so there's the first coat. I've noticed it with the white, because you can see how thick it's going on a little better than the black. You tend to use a lot more of it. So I blew through almost a full can on one coat, so we'll see how that goes. I may have to go out and get some more PlastiDip spray real quick. But back in about 30 minutes and put on the second coat. Okay, let's go ahead and put the second coat on. Okay, so that's the second coat. And we'll just go ahead and do this. Probably try to put on at least 4 coats, maybe 5 coats. And we'll let this wait 30 minutes and then we'll go on with the process. Okay, so since the last time we were on, I've put about 3 more coats on. I've also got a little bit smarter, and I got some of those solo cups, just the plastic cups, and I'm using those to hold everything up off of the plastic, because by the time the PlastiDip dries, it really sticks to the drop cloth too well, and then it wants to rip the drop cloth, and then you get pieces of the drop cloth stuck on there, and it's kind of a pain. So the plastic cups work really well just to hold everything up off of the drop cloth. And we're still using the bricks for the back piece. I'd say that it takes almost a full can to get a good coat on everything. So you're probably going to want to use at least 6 cans of this. That's going to give you, probably 2 good coats on the back side and 5 coats on the front. You might want to get 7 cans just so you'll have 1 extra just to make sure. But that's what I would suggest doing. I've had to go out and get some more. So I'm actually, we're back to the black. That's what they had at the store. So we'll go ahead and put 1 last coat on here just to make sure it's, good. And then that'll be it for the PlastiDip. I don't know if you can see it, but you want to put it on pretty thick, each coat in fact, but especially the last coat. You need to be thick enough that it kind of self-levels, and the black covers so much better than the white does that you'll be tempted not to put that thick a coat on, but it needs to be thick enough that there's kind of a liquid layer on top. That way it can make a nice smooth surface. Otherwise, you're going to get just kind of a rough, textured surface. For this piece right here, I've taken some double stick tape and just kind of stuck it on the back. That way it won't fly off when I'm painting it. Interesting. Okay, so you'll notice I wasn't really worried about getting the edges. They're gonna show up because they're white, and you know, I've already hit them pretty heavily on the last couple of layers, so I know they've got a good coat on those. And I mean, I'm not trying to paint these black, I'm just trying to get a good coating of the PlastiDip on there, so it doesn't really matter to me if they're black or white. So after these cure good, I'm gonna go ahead, once you get finished, you wanna wait a good 4 hours before you use them. So for me, I'm gonna wait at least 4 hours before I go ahead and do anything else to these. So I'll see you in about 4.5 hours.
Well, that seems like a pretty good place to end this video. In the next video, we'll take everything all the way through to getting it primed and ready for paint. Also, the Sintra pieces will make their appearance, and I'll show you how to go ahead and do the damage on those so that it'll, you know, look really good. So basically, you're just not going to want to miss that episode. So why don't you go ahead and subscribe and like this video, because you know it's really your comments and likes that keep me motivated to keep going. So until next time, thanks.